Hi, and welcome back to Build Mode. I'm your host, Isabelle Johannessen. This season, we've talked about product market fit, and on this episode, we're talking about founder market fit. So I'm sure you've heard investors ask, what's your competitive advantage? And for the most part, they're asking about what is your strategic defensive moat? But from day one, you already have unique experiences and network and perspectives that can and should be leveraged to launch your startup. This week, I had the chance to talk to Kyle Rudolph and John Wahlberg, the co-founders of Altru, a fundraising platform that used the sports star power of the founder to disrupt the charitable giving industry and democratize access to exclusive celebrity giveaways. This episode isn't about having a famous founder on your team. It's about leveraging the community that you've already built to go to market knowing that you have your network backing you up. All right. Well, hi, Kyle and John. Thank you guys so much for joining us on Build Mode. We're thrilled to have you. If we can start by you both introducing yourselves.
Yeah, I'm John Wahlberg. So I'm one of the co-founders of Altru.
And I am Kyle Rudolph, one of the other co-founders. John and I have two other partners as well.
So can you start at a high level? What does Altru do?
Altru is a professional fundraising company. So what that means is when someone comes to our website and they make a purchase, we can actually give them a charitable donation credit for doing that. So with that professional fundraising status, what we do is we operate a marketplace where we connect fans who want to win amazing once-in-a-lifetime prizes and experiences, along with the celebrities and the nonprofits that have these experiences that would typically only be available in like a charitable gala where it costs thousands of dollars to get in the door and then you have to be the high bidder. We take those same experiences and we market them to a global audience where for as little as $10, someone can make a donation to the charity and they could win that. And then as a professional fundraiser, we're the for-profit company that sits in the middle that's able to build a business around this business of raising money for charity.
Just to add to that, I think the biggest thing, myself and one of our other co-founders, Jason Zucker, Jason's still playing in the NHL for the Buffalo Sabres. I played 12 years in the NFL. So we know exactly what our partners are ultimately signing up for. We know the trials and tribulations of being a professional athlete. We know the stress that puts on, but we also know what it's like to want to leverage your platform to do good and to make a difference. And so what we've tried to create with Altru is ultimately the platform in which you can leverage your platform as a celebrity to interact with fans that most of the time wouldn't have the opportunity to support your foundation or the cause that you're raising money for. You think about the charitable giving industry, it's over $580 billion. Only 20% of that was online.
And originally, you were building something, Athletes for Minnesota Kids, if that was charging around $10,000 for a foursome of golf, and then now pivoted to Altru with a much lower, initial ticket for people to participate. Can you talk us through that pivot and how you ended up with this new model?
Yeah, that really was the impetus leading into this company. So what we did is we created this charity called Athletes for Minnesota Kids. And the thought was to partner with athletes who wanted to raise money for a specific cause, but maybe didn't have their own charity. Using traditional fundraising methods, throwing golf tournaments, hosting galas, we had a pretty successful first year where we were able to raise a couple $100,000 for charity. And one of the ways we did this is we had an exclusive golf tournament. We charged $10,000 for a foursome is where we started and then went up from there. I think we were able to raise like maybe $130,000, with that one event. And like other in-person events, anyone who's ever thrown one of these knows like these are a lot of work to put on. So it became like a mini full-time job. It was 6 months of planning and coordination and project management. And, it comes up to the golf tournament and we got it off the ground and we had a successful event. And we were like, okay, this is great. Like next year, our goal is going to be to raise $200,000 with this. Well, next year is when the pandemic hit as we entered into 2020. So we had this huge goal of raising hundreds of thousands of dollars in charity, and we ended up raising $0 in charity that year because of that. So that was really the kind of the problem that we were trying to solve is, looking at how do we leverage our networks, right? Like with Kyle and with Jason and with our other co-founder, we had a strong network. And, we knew that there had to be a solution out there that was different than like these in-person events that were happening all over the country. And it was always the same kind of like 2 or 3 events. There was like a fun run, golf tournament, gala, and like that was it. So like Kyle said earlier, only 20% of charitable giving was done online. And one of our co-founders had launched a crowdfunding campaign, Jason Zucker, when he was playing with the Minnesota Wild. So Jason was number 16. And what they did is they asked fans to make donations in any increment of 16. So, $1.60, $16, $160. And then that money would be used to build an activation space inside the Masonic University of Minnesota Children's Hospital. So using this crowdfunding model, Jason was able to raise $1.2 million to get this space built. So kind of thinking of that model and, how we could use these platforms to amplify what we were trying to do. And ultimately, the theory was it's probably a lot easier to get 10,000 people to give $10 than it is to get one person to give $10,000. So that was, what we started building. Like once we sort of had this light bulb moment, it was Kyle and I in a coffee shop in Wayzata, Minnesota, like right after the NFL season ended in January, and by July, our website was up and running, and we had our first campaign running that year.
So basically, what you're saying is on one side of the spectrum, you have, celebrities with foundations and they want to give back to charity. But now you've entered into tech startup world. So now you're in our territory. And after participating in Battlefield this year, I'm sure there were many companies on the show floor that are wildly different from what you all are doing. And I remember reviewing your application and at first being like, okay, it's a nonprofit. That's not quite what we do. It's great what they're doing, but like it may not be Battlefield. And then we read a little further and we're like, oh, they're venture backed and they're generating revenue. So walk us through your business model a bit. How are you able to teeter the charitable aspect with also becoming a tech startup and eventually maybe reaching profitability?
Well, I think the biggest thing when you think about our model and applying it to nonprofits. So historically, across nonprofits, their two biggest challenges are fundraising and awareness. For us, ultimately, we feel like as Altru, we've created a for-profit company that can ultimately serve hundreds of nonprofits and provide those two biggest things in which they struggle with the most. If you're a nonprofit and you're going to go raise money, well, you have to spend money to go raise that money. Like I talked about it before, there's always overhead that comes along with having these events and raising money. When we partner with a celebrity or the nonprofit, create one of these once in a lifetime experiences, raise the money, the nonprofits are getting 100% of that grant that we're sending them, and they don't have to do hardly anything. Look, what Athletes for Minnesota Kids did was incredible. What we tried to do at Masonic Children's Hospital impacted a ton of lives at that one hospital in that one market. Well, here we are 4 years later. We've worked with over 200 nonprofits, raised over $15 million for charity, and none of that would have been possible without the model that we created. There's no way. Without the tech, without the scalability, you're never going to be able to reach hundreds of thousands of donors the way we have.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that, Kyle, is, one of the things that we like to say is that, doing good and doing well don't need to be mutually exclusive. Like you can do both. And as we've gotten more into the Bay Area world of venture capital, one of the things, consistently with a lot of these funds and VC groups is a lot of them want to invest in companies that are social impact companies. And that's really what we are. On the tech side of it, we're a consumer SaaS platform. We have subscribers, we have memberships, we have reoccurring revenue. But on the other side of it, who we're serving are these nonprofits that we activate. Like Kyle said, we do the heavy lifting so that they can do the work that's really important. And then we can live in the middle as this for-profit company where we can spend money, we can scale, we can attract top talent, we can take venture investments, and we can really build this thing out. And we're in a very unique spot in the market with that, where without the charities that support or that we support, we don't have a platform, but we're still very much a infinitely scalable, tech platform.
You have disrupted charitable giving, which is a sentence I never thought I would say, but that's really, really awesome. And it's fantastic what you all are building. So I'm curious about the donor side of your platform, right? So if the average person wants to come on and participate in some way, donate to the cause, but also maybe bid on a, car ride with Miley Cyrus or whatever, whatever's available at the time. What does that look like? What is the membership? Can someone just donate one time on a specific auction item? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have both opportunities. So if you're a fan of George Kittle and you come on our website right now as a diehard Niners fan, you have the opportunity to support the organization in which George is raising money for. You can support George, you can enter, donate as little as $10, as much as $500 for entries to win that one specific campaign. There's also the opportunity to come to our site, become a member, and then that monthly donation of $25 ultimately gets you entries into everything that's on our site. So from a finance standpoint, if you were to do the math, the membership model is way more attractive. You're going to get more entries. But for us, we felt like, in order to create something where, look, if we were going to have this community of people, and that's ultimately what All True All Access is. You have a community of people that are donating $25 a month that are entered to win all of these cool prizes. So that's the ultimate goal for us is, creating this large community of people that, all they care about is making a difference. And, ultimately we use the chance to win once in a lifetime prizes as a way to have a win-win. Our nonprofits are winning by raising money that ultimately wouldn't be coming. I think it's either 94 or 96% of our donors donate to that organization for the first time when they come to our platform. So these are dollars that ordinarily would not be going to these charities. The other win is our sweepstakes winners. They're donating $10, $25, $50, and sometimes winning $200,000-$300,000 cars. I mean, it's truly like you won the lottery.
Talk to me a bit about your celebrities or the people that are involved in the actual giveaways or in the auction items. How do you go about partnering with them? What is your pitch to them to participate?
Well, again, I think it's something as a company, we have a bit of an edge in terms of Jason and I being in the shoes of all of our partners. We completely understand what it's like to be pulled in a million directions and, have to have this singular focus on your craft, whether that be on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever that may be. You wouldn't have this platform to make a difference if you didn't have that. And you need to focus on that. So what we've created and what our pitch is to our partners, and, we have an incredible partnership team that does a lot of outreach. We're at the point now where others are seeing the celebrities on our site and they go, hey, I saw so-and-so did that really cool prize. Like, I want to do something. Hey, I saw Kate Hudson gave away a Porsche. Like, can I do something like that? So we're starting to field some inbound partnership requests now, which is great. But I think the biggest thing is, we really stay true to our pitch to the celebrities that we're here to make something that's a light lift for them. We don't want any money from the foundation. We want very little time, in terms of the effort to raise the money from the foundation and from our partner. And then ultimately we hope to have a huge impact.
And I'm curious what your launch campaign was. How did it start? What was the first thing that you auctioned off? And did it come from your network alone? I mean, is it kind of like, here, I have some cool friends and let's go take a Porsche ride together? Or what was the thought behind that?
That was, we had the idea for this company. And once we knew what we were doing, like we got it built pretty quick. We went from first meeting in a coffee house discussing the idea to a fully functioning launched website with partners 6.5 months later. And it comes time to launch. And it was about the same time that the 3M Open, which again, we're tying back to golf, that's the PGA Tour golf event that comes through Minnesota, that was happening in like a week. So Kyle is an ambassador for the 3M Open. He plays in the celebrity tournament that they have, and he's like a big public figure with that golf tournament. So Kyle, through his network, reached out to the gentleman that runs the 3M Open in Minnesota, and I think just said like, hey, we want to give away a trip to this thing. Like, what can you do? So they agreed to it. So we had our prize, which was literally a trip to the golf tournament and an opportunity to walk with one of the players while they played. So it was just us. We didn't know the first thing about advertising or social media or marketing, but we had a good network. And so Kyle started calling local reporters, radio, morning show, like 10 o'clock news, and they all ran stories on All True launching and this opportunity to make a donation to the 3M Open Fund and be entered to win a prize. So that campaign ran for like 48 hours, literally just a test of the website to see if this would even work. And I think it generated over $4,000 in 48 hours. And like, we're just sitting here looking at each other going like, I can't believe this is working. Like that was still the days when someone made a purchase or they made a donation, the email would like come in through the website that, so-and-so has made an order. And like, I just sat there and my phone would just go ding, 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 ding. And it's all these orders coming through the website and just staring at this. And I mean, every user, every dollar amount, like obsessively checking every order and almost couldn't believe that this was real life and that it was happening. So with the success of that, Kyle and Jason reached out to more just direct contact, straight to celebrity experiences to see if they'd be willing to work with us too. And I mean, even for the first 6 months, I don't think we ran a single ad. It was all just organic, traction at that point. And, I think that first year we did like $30,000 in revenue. And I just thought it was unbelievable that this thing was actually working and people believed in what we were doing.
That's awesome. And it sounds like it happened really organically, which, we tell founders all the time to make sure they're looking for their own founder market fit, right? What advantages do you naturally have and how can we sort of use that to, accelerate your company? And I think you guys are a great example of tapping into that. And John, I'm curious, what is your background? How did you get into this whole thing to begin with?
Yeah. So my background is 25 years in sales leadership for a med tech company. But I will say, although it's probably not the typical like Bay Area founder story, it did really prepare me well for entrepreneurship. The company that I worked for, multi-billion-dollar company, but zero presence in the Midwest. So when I came to Minnesota, I think they were doing $100,000 in sales. And they were like, figure it out. We've been here 50 years. We've never been successful. So everything from building the team to figuring out the marketing, figuring out the go-to-market strategy, going up against these $50 billion companies, like managing the budget. And it was extremely entrepreneurial and was able to scale that to $20 million in ARR over the course of about 7 years. Everything that I needed to learn to step in and do this job, it was just such a good training ground for what I was doing. So although you might not think, oh, med tech and, running a tech platform as a founder, there's way more things in common, I think, than not with that background.
I think that sounds like the perfect founder boot camp, actually. We'll be right back after a quick break. And Kyle, I'm curious how you, and maybe also Jason, balance sort of leveraging your personal brand and your network without overextending yourself or over leveraging it, right? And I'm sure that's probably a fine line to walk, but I'm curious how you guys think about that.
Well, I think the biggest thing, and it started from the beginning, was created something where, whether we're speaking directly to talent and they're friends of ours in the locker room or friends across different, music, entertainment, creating a pitch and providing a service that when it's all said and done, whoever's on the other side of that call is saying, this seems too good to be true. Like, what's the catch? And it's like, that's what we've tried to build. We've tried to build something that just, it makes sense. When you create something to where everybody's winning, everybody is seeing the value that All True brings, and its value far beyond just our North Star that's always raising as much money for charity as we possibly can. These nonprofits, one of their biggest challenges is awareness. As a nonprofit, you are frowned upon if you ultimately raise $10, take 4 of those $10 and go spend it on marketing. Any brand in the world would be like, of course we spend 40% of our revenue on marketing. That's how we make the next $10. And that $4 turned into now $20 in revenue for the company. If you're a nonprofit and you do that and you spend $4 of the $10 that you raised, you get a bad charity navigator grade. People look at you like, why are you spending that money on marketing and awareness? And it's like, ultimately they were able to do the math. That's now $16 that could be making an impact, but they're not allowed to do that. So for us, being the entity that sits over all of these nonprofits, we're able to add a ton of value in the awareness component and bringing eyeballs and attention to not just the great work that our partners are doing, but that their organizations are doing as well. And now someone may find out about an organization and they would have never known about it until they saw the All True campaign, and they may want to get involved. They may donate directly to the organization. We have thousands of people that are donating to these causes for the first time. And now these organizations get the opportunity to re-engage those donors because, like we said before, only one person wins. And, you know, it's not a great business model in terms of like everybody's happy on that side. It's like, no, just there's one winner, and that winner is really happy. So for us, like, we got to tell that impact story so the other 99% of our donors see, yes, I didn't win that once in a lifetime opportunity or that really cool car, but I know my $10 is making a huge difference for the organization that I supported.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think, charitable giving is the first industry I would think of that's ripe for disruption, but apparently it was, and you guys saw that when clearly others didn't. And I'm curious if you've seen some competition or if others have kind of caught on to this might be a better way to do it. Because in a space like yours, right, I would hope that competition is kind of a good thing, right? The more people that are giving, the more that are engaging. But how do you see competition these days?
There are others that have popped up and others in this space, but I think of it like a Venn diagram. You have the really cool, expensive prizes like the $250,000 cars that we give away. You've got the celebrity experiences and kind of celebrity influencer piece of it. And then you have the charitable donation part of it, where as a highly regulated professional fundraiser, registered and in good standing with, when a user comes to our website, we can give them a charitable donation for making that. So we're the only company that sits in the middle of all three of those things. There's other companies that have popped up where maybe they're giving away cars, or maybe they can give a charitable donation, but then they don't have the celebrity, or like nobody does what we do. So the moat that we've built around our business really comes around our operational complexity, and our licensing and registrations and regulations that are on us. So although the competition is there, I do feel like there's nobody in front of us on the road right now, and that we can continue to innovate and push forward in this space. We were just on the battlefront or battlefield stage a month ago, as a very early stage startup. And yet we also look at ourselves as the market leader in this space. So I think it's a unique space to be in for us, where it is a really interesting opportunity to disrupt a very archaic way of doing things.
Yeah, you are sitting at a very unique intersection, and I think that there's a lot of moats that can come from the celebrity power and the stardom to begin with. Kyle, I'd love to hear about your experience being a startup founder versus being a pro athlete. What has been the hardest and the best of both experience? Compare apples, oranges. How has it been?
I mean, I think it's very apples to apples. When you think about your career as an athlete, you have to work with people from all different types, backgrounds, ultimately setting your differences aside to reach a common goal. And so what it's done is now, as an entrepreneur and as a co-founder leading a company, I always compare it, and John hears this all the time in our, officer leads calls, like, I always compare it to leading a team. And, for me, just like I wanted to get the best out of the 52 other guys in the locker room that were going out there on Sundays with me, I want to get the best out of the 17 other individuals on our team. And, we tell people all the time, like, as a startup, we want to grow with you. I hope that your last job is at All True, and ultimately we'll backfill the roles as you continue to grow and develop into bigger and, different roles, leadership roles. And so for me as a co-founder and as an athlete, it's very similar. And you're always just trying to bring your best every single day, motivate those around you. Every day is not going to be good. You're going to have adversity, you're going to have challenges. I've faced it plenty of times in sport. Business is no different. Yes, we're in this really feel good world where we get to raise money for nonprofits, but ultimately, if the company's not healthy and successful and operating at a high level, we're not delivering the product that our partners and their nonprofits deserve. And, it doesn't matter that we have all these big, grandiose ideas that we want to apply to this archaic way of doing things. If we're not keeping up with those changes and making sure that we're operating at a high level, just as if I were going through week by week in the NFL season. It doesn't matter what we did last week. We have the exact same thing with our company. We have our wins and we have our lessons. And if you don't learn from your lessons, then it becomes a loss.
That's really awesome. That's, I think, a perspective that not everyone gets to hear. So thank you for sharing that. But John, I would love to still ask you a bit about how the journey has been for you as a founder, right? What were some of the challenging moments and how did you overcome?
One of the challenges I think that we came across pretty quick is, as I mentioned earlier, we found success very quick. And as we were entering our second year, so not even a full year in the business, we landed this huge partnership with the NFL, running 32 simultaneous fundraisers across their Walter Payton Man of the Year award, which is the highest award that they give every year. Every team has one nominee. And the thought was, let's use the Ultra platform to elevate this award and promote it to a global audience. So because of Kyle's relationship with the league, we sort of faked that we were much bigger than we were, but it was Kyle, it was myself, and we had an intern who was maybe working like 10 hours a week for 20 bucks an hour. And suddenly we have to launch 32 simultaneous campaigns in a month, like ready, set, go. So we put in a lot of hours, kind of worked our tails off and had a very successful campaign with the NFL. Like they immediately signed on for the next year. I think we raised $500,000 for player back causes. It was the first time ever where fans have been able to participate in player back causes. Like they gave us a shout out in their official press release about the award. So as a company that's not even a year old, this is a huge win. And I think one of the early mistakes was assuming that just because we were on a high there, like it was always going to maintain that high. So at that point, we knew that this couldn't be a hobby anymore, and we needed to actually turn this into a real company and go hire some people and bring them in. But we hadn't fundraised at that point. Like we were still paying for everything. So we took on a lot of salaries and we had no revenue, for that period. In those days, we felt like we got it to that point where, okay, everything is going great for this company, but I'm probably not the person to take it the rest of the way because there's all these other people out there with, backgrounds in marketing and backgrounds in content and creative and performance media. And none of us had any of that experience. So we really turned things over and took a back seat at that point. So it's one of those things that I've reflected on a lot since then. I think especially for other entrepreneurs like in this space, nobody knows your company as well as you do. Nobody understands it may ever will as well as you do. And, your vision and your plans, like you can't outsource that. And trying to do so like so early in our company, we had a real identity crisis and we kind of struggled through that phase. And eventually our revenue caught up to the additional hires that we made. But I think doing it backwards where, like many other founder stories that we've talked about, it's a second mortgage on the house. It's cutting back on everything. And when you're doing that to make payroll week after week, and you're like, I hope this is the week. I hope this is the week. And I would do it again in a second. I mean, I don't regret it, but I also think that there's no shortcuts. And what we were trying to do was 1,000x our revenue by hiring a big team and just didn't realize the amount of work that it would continue to take, to get to that point.
Hey, but you learn the hard way, you learn in the end. But it's interesting because, I mean, a lot of the founders I work with that we see at TechCrunch, right? They're going the opposite way. They go out into the world wanting to be a tech founder, and they kind of maybe know the playbook, right? If you're going to raise VC before we even have a product. But you guys did it the other way, right? We're seeing organic and natural synergies in ways that we can kind of use this kind of unique network or unique star power to create good in this world, and then figure out the funding and the hiring along the way, right? Because that really should be an afterthought. They're operational. How do we get the money and the team to make this thing that we already know works? We know there's a product market fit. We know there's a founder market fit, and then find the tools to elevate it rather than the other way around, which is what we see more often than, we probably should. Would also love to just get your advice to founders out there who, again, maybe didn't have a professional sports career and have that sort of built-in celebrity, but to founders who also might be able to leverage their own network or their own unique, thought leadership in their industry, whatever it may be, but you've managed to leverage it very strategically and authentically, and I think that's really inspiring for a lot of budding founders. So any tips you'd give to them?
I think the biggest thing is like we hear it all the time, like your network is your net worth. And there's only one way to grow your network. Certainly for us, we felt like as co-founders, we had a head start because there were four of us. We all had different areas of expertise. We all had different networks that we could rely on, that we could call in, that we could leverage. As a co-founder, you need to spend almost just as much time as you do in your company, building your company, leading your company, as you do building your network and ultimately finding people who can help you. I say all the time, again, comparing sports to entrepreneurship and being a co-founder, when I went from high school to college and college to the NFL, I immediately gravitated toward the guys who had played 10 years in the NFL and had made Pro Bowls and were having success at that level because they then became part of my network and I could rely on them and lean into the experiences that they already had. As a co-founder, it's no different. If you're spending just as much time meeting folks and learning from folks as you are building your business and running your business, I get it, it's hard, but I think at times people don't realize how important that piece of it is. And when you ultimately invest the time in building a network around you that allows you to continue to level up and be a better CEO, co-founder, leader, when you have those tough times, you know how to handle them, you know how to pivot, you can pivot quickly. And I think that's what makes a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, to have that takeaway of always having people who challenge you around you and not being afraid to introduce yourself to people who might be a couple steps ahead and just be, hey, I would love to, pick your brain on this topic. All right, with that, I think we're going to wrap. So obviously not every founder starts out with the star power that Kyle did, but I think there's a lesson here that every founder can create their own network and tap into their own form of thought leadership. To take the unique competence that you have and share that knowledge with the world is the direct path to thought leadership, right? So if you studied something at Stanford, medicine track, you probably are one of the world's leading experts in that topic, whether you really think you're about yourself that way or not. But to be able to take that knowledge and share it on LinkedIn, right? Share it on a podcast, create a TikTok or an Instagram and start talking about your knowledge and experience, and maybe even thinking of it in your own head as educating the world about this topic. But through that, you will become a thought leader, a public thought leader in that space. And that's something that every founder can do based on the industry you're building in and your own expertise and your background, and capitalize on that the same way that Kyle and Altaru did. Similarly with your network, right? Everyone can go and build their own network. And Kyle's might have been slightly different with a lot of celebrities and high-powered people and public figures. But again, anyone can go to networking events and talk to the right people. And as the saying goes, if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So be intentional about creating a targeted and strong network, and don't be afraid to share your unique knowledge with the world. Build Mode is a TechCrunch podcast. Each episode is produced and edited by Maggie Nye and hosted by me, Isabelle Johannessen. Our art and design is also by Maggie Nye. A big thanks to Morgan Little, who leads our audience development, the Foundry and Cheddar video teams, and most of all to you, the builders, and everyone else in the wider startup community. We'll see you back here next time.